What's up, everybody? It's Greg Birch with Delta Financial, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring our own guest speakers. Today, I have the honor and pleasure of welcoming Mr. Derek Wilson. Derek, what's going on, brother?
Man, I love the applause. I love it.
This pumps you up, right?
Yeah. Let's do this.
Yeah, man. I love it. How you doing, brother?
Doing well. So excited to be on. Pleasure for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your experiences and your knowledge with the audience. And so that everyone knows a little bit about you, I'm going to talk a little bit and introduce you. So Derek spent 15 years in high ticket sales, working with and for some of the top names, people like Russell Brunson, Frank Kern, Alex Becker, Jay Shetty, and the list goes on. While he still helps sales teams scale on the consulting side, he's also built a multiple six-figure business in the D2C meat business that is raised on their several thousand acre ranch there in Idaho. He's been with his wife since they were 19. They've been together for 20 years. That is a feat in and of itself there. And they've been married for 15. They have a 12-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old son, and a twin 5-year-old girls. Brother, I love it. I got 4 kids myself too.
Nice.
It's very nice.
Someone told me once, I don't know if this is true, but the most successful people always have 4 kids. I have no idea if that's true. There it is.
I like it. I like the reference. Yeah. So, Derek, why don't you tell a little bit about, start where you want to start. Talk about sales, talk about, the people that you've worked with and how you transition into your current business.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. A long time ago, kind of going back all these years, I started my first business at 21. I tried to do the college thing. I was going there mainly to play football and ended up tearing my shoulder up a little bit and didn't ever play. I realized I didn't really want to go to college. And so ended up starting my own business. That failed in kind of the 08-09 crisis, housing crisis. And it was like, it happened to work out to where there was this internet marketing guy that was looking for salespeople. And this is someone who happened to turn out to be a guy by the name of Russell Brunson. Maybe some of you know him, maybe not. But anyways, long story short, he ended up starting up what is now called Clickfunnels, which is a $100+ million a year business, and was there with him kind of from the very beginning and was doing really, really well with that. And, because I grew up in a super small town, Greg, like very small, less than 400 people. And so it was like my dream come true, right? Like you move out of the small town, you get to the city, you make all this money and life is great. But then kind of everything had a wrench thrown in it. It was actually almost 6 years ago. So December 15th, 2016, I got the call that no one ever wants to get. And it was that my dad had passed away suddenly from a massive heart attack. And, we have a ranch that's been in our family since 1890. And after he died, he didn't have a will. We kind of went through a process with my stepmom where she was trying to sell it. And I didn't really know what to do because here I was making all this money. Me and my wife and our kids had just bought our dream home, but I knew I didn't want us to lose our family ranch. Now I didn't want to be a rancher. That stuff's hard. You don't make any money. But I also was like, we can't lose this. This is literally like I'm 5th generation of this. It was homesteaded. Mm. And so we went through this, kind of a long story short on that as well, like this big, long buyout process. Ended up selling our dream home. We moved back to a house that was essentially falling down, remodeled that house. And now we live in the middle of nowhere with our 4 kids on the ranch. And yeah, walked away from Clickfunnels, walked away from kind of all that comfort, the 401k, the job, the security and all of that, and launched a couple businesses over the past few years. And now just, I guess, as they say, kind of living the dream out here in the middle of nowhere.
I love that. That's a quick, great synopsis. When you went into, let's talk about your time at Clickfunnels. How long did you spend working with Russell Brunson?
So there's kind of two different portions there, but it was close to 10 years altogether. So
Okay.
it was a few years before. In fact, we used to have a big call center. So like if you've seen, and we weren't this way, I promise, but like Wolf of Wall Street, Boiler Room, stuff like that. Like we had a big call center selling high ticket coaching. And so we actually grew that from about 8 people to the highest point was like 70, I think, on our call center, selling like 5 to 10K internet marketing coaching programs. And then in like 2012, 13, there was like some merchanting stuff in the online marketing world, kind of essentially shut down that whole business. Went to some other things for a couple of years. And then I went back with Russell when right in the very beginning stages of ClickFunnels, there was like 6 of us, I think, in the office, and just kind of watched that slowly, steadily grow to where it was like 6 turned into like 10 and then 20. And then before you knew it, it was like, I don't even know, like 300 people there when I left, I think.
Wow. Wow. And what did you learn when it comes to sales? Let's talk about sales tactics that you learned that you really took away that's helped you as a business owner. Because I believe when you're a business owner, you got to be good at 2 things: sales, leadership, influence, ultimately between the 2 of those. What all did you learn when it came to sales?
So, and I still do a fair amount of like consulting in this space. So usually what I do, like just yesterday, actually, I had a guy reach out to me, and he's actually in part of Arte. And I just told him I'll give you some help. And basically my biggest my biggest tip when it comes to sales, because I know a lot of people are out there trying to sell their own stuff. And I think as entrepreneurs, we all get so excited. Like, I have a meat business. I want to tell you, Greg, how great my meat is, right? Like, you should buy our steaks because they're so good and so tasty. People don't care, right? Like, it
I
always
don't
comes
give a
back
shit.
to, yeah, exactly. It's always like, what problem can you solve for me?
Yeah.
So if I'm in like because I've over the years sold everything from, 5K coaching packages all the way up to, I think 50K is the highest I've ever sold in like online coaching programs. And it's never about the thing. It's always about what the thing solves, right? That's the thing that, in my opinion, almost all salespeople miss. Like, I'll even see entrepreneurs go out there and be like, I need to hire a salesperson that's educated in this field. And it's like, no, what you need to do is find somebody who's really, really good at figuring out why people buy. And depending on which industry you're in, that could be a number of different reasons, right? Like, if I'm selling internet marketing coaching to you, Greg, I'm not selling internet marketing coaching. I'm asking you, what would it look like if you had a business that was online that could generate you an extra, I don't know, 5, 10K a month? Like, what would your life look like? Would you be able to save for retirement? Would you be able to pay off some debt? Right? Like, those are the reasons why people will buy, because I can talk to them about landing pages and upsell pages and funnel nerdy stuff. Right. And people are going to be like, you know what, Derek, you gave me a ton of information to think about. Let me get back to you in a week. Right. And that's just, it's a kiss of death for a salesperson.
Yeah.
So it's like very simple. What is it you're trying to solve? I'm going to go as deep into that pain as I can. And then I'm going to make sure that you understand that what we do solves that. And obviously be ethical, make sure that what you do actually does solve that. Right. But yeah, it's never about the thing. It's always about what the thing solves, if we were going to break it down to the ridiculous.
Yeah. And I love how you break it down that simply, because this is the same thing that I teach my agents, and this is at least in the insurance industry that I've seen. I'm sure that every other sales industry is very, very similar. People come in and they feel like, well, I got to know everything about the widget, the product, the service that I'm selling, the ins and outs, all of it, because I got to wow the customer. And they think like, I'm going to go up to the customer and say, hey, I'm the best salesman and I got the best product and the best company. And this is all it does. Boom, 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 boom. And it's just like, well, what the hell do you know about them?
Yeah.
What do you even know that it's like are you even hitting points that they give a shit about? Because it's not the product that sells. They're going to sell themselves just by you asking really good questions and you showing some empathy that, hey, I understand where you're coming from. Let me show you something that might fit those needs and take care of the challenges, the issues that you have in your life, whatever it may be. Right. And so I'm always trying to teach my agents that you don't need to know everything about the product. I mean, it's good to know a lot. It's good to be educated, but all you're doing is you're stalling yourself from getting out there and taking action. What you need to do is get better at communication. You need to
Yeah.
get better at asking good questions. You need to get better at having a conversation and understanding, hey, like, ask what and how questions to develop out their situation and just keep asking questions to guide the conversation to show here's all the pain points, here's all the problems, and you're going to start digging in there. You're going to start like just getting in there and finding out more how painful it is, what their real challenges are. And what's going to happen is that they're eventually going to be like, man, I really got to get this taken care of. Oh, well, let me show you something. I really believe that this is something that can help you. Right.
Yep.
The
Yep.
sale just naturally happens afterwards.
So one of the big things, and this goes against, I think, what a lot of successful salespeople would tell, especially new people in sales. And again, maybe this even goes against what you would, and I would love to hear your take on it. But
Yeah.
so, because I've done some things within the insurance space as well, but even more so universally, there's so many people that want to go out there and they've read some book that's like you've got to build rapport, and it's like, you know what, when I look at it, I don't buy from people that I like, right? Like I buy from people that I feel like I can trust and that can help me.
Mm.
I mean, and the example that I've given in trainings over the years is how many times is it when like your buddy comes up and is like, hey man, like, do you want to buy this thing from me? And you're like, no, I'm good. Right. Because you're comfortable. He's your
Yeah.
buddy. It's like, no, I can tell him no. But then like your dad, or maybe you're, like a father figure type of person that you truly respect comes to you and you're like, hey, you want to buy this? And you're like, I probably should buy it. Like, I respect this person, right?
Yeah.
Like I trust that they have my best interest in mind.
Mhm.
And so that's where sometimes I feel like so many sales are lost, is that we try to get in there and we try to be best friends. And we basically, it's the equivalent of getting friend zoned in the sales space, right?
Yes.
It's like you become such good friends with your prospect. And I know people are like, well, yeah, but I'm trying to build relationships. Yes, build relationships because people believe that you can help them because they'll trust you, right?
Yes.
Don't build relationships because you kiss their ass and you get to know all this crazy stuff about how the weather is in some far off place that you couldn't give two shits about, right? Like, no, it's like, how do we figure out what this person needs? How do we get to know them better than, like, I've had people tell me before on sales calls, like, I've never even told my wife this before, Derek, but this, and this, right? Because you actually take the time to get to know somebody. And I don't mean from a rapport standpoint to where it's like, I'm just like shooting the shit with you. It's like, no, I'm asking you deep questions to get to know who you truly are.
Yes.
Right. And to me, that's where I feel like a lot of people make the mistake, is they just stay very surface level.
Mhm.
But it's like, if we can go 3 layers deep, that to me is always where the gold is in sales. And then that's where you earn trust too, because people actually feel like you care. And again, like, you should care if you're in sales, in my opinion. But yeah, once you start getting surface level, you start figuring out why it is that this person will buy. From that, it's just making sure that, hey, all the details make sense. Like, we would go through like a 40-minute, like, especially back in the old call center days, things have evolved a little bit now, but it would be like a 45-minute call, and 30 minutes of that call would be all about them, their pain, their goals, getting to know them better, asking deeper questions. 10 minutes would be like actually what we were providing, and 5 minutes would be collecting credit card information, right? Like, that's how the calls would consist. Whereas the people who would struggle, it would be 30 minutes of the business stuff, maybe 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after of actual stuff that matters. And they'd go broke, right? Like, they wouldn't make any sales. They'd quit. They'd get fired, whatever.
Mhm. I agree 1,000%. See, I think there's a misunderstanding about rapport. People think rapport is that fluffy bullshit that you're talking about. That like, oh, hey, how's the weather there? And like, oh, I see you got an American flag on your background. I really like that picture. I got one just like it in my room. That's bullshit. They don't give a shit, man. Like they don't care. And when you do that, you're coming off as you're trying to be a salesy person, like you're trying to build this fake rapport. I
Yep.
actually had when I first started in insurance, the first company that I was with, they were like, hey, I spend the first 5 to 10 minutes just talking to them, trying to get them to laugh. And then I move forward. And it was just like, okay. And so I watched it happen, and it felt real awkward, even for me to sit there and watch it when I was like on a ride along appointment. And I just watched this happen, and I was like, I'm not doing that, bro. I'm just
Yeah.
not, that's not me. I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to get to work. Right.
Yeah.
And so you can build rapport through other means. You don't have to make fake jokes, show fake interest in their family photos when you're in the home, ask dumb questions that you really do not care about, right? It is asking those questions. It is asking the little bit deeper questions, asking, hey, what challenges do you have? What keeps you up at night? I always ask the first question, like, hey, depending upon how I had that call, like if it was a lead that signed up and then I call them and I find out, I'm like, hey, what motivated you to sign up for that form? What was going through your mind?
Yep.
Right. And I'm just digging in, and then I ask more what and how questions to continue to develop out that second level, that third level, that fourth level, getting as deep as possible. And I'm not speaking. I'm just like, that makes sense. And then every once in a while I'll jump in and say, okay, so it sounds like you're saying this, this, and this, showing empathy and understanding, and B, that I'm paying the fuck attention, that I care about. Every human being on the planet wants to be understood. Period.
Yep.
Everybody wants to be understood. And when I show that I understand them, I'm coming to their level and saying, hey, I'm looking them in the sockets of their soul and saying, I understand you. I hear you. Let me help you. Let me serve you. Right. And then I roll everything up. I take all that information and I say, hey, I got, this was a great conversation. Let me make sure that I understand everything. And if I don't, go ahead and tell me. Right. You go and let me know. And then I'm going to tell their story. Why? Because stories sell. But you don't have to tell some other random story. What's the most impactful story you could tell somebody? Their story. And it's
Yep.
all the information they just told me. And I'm telling the story in my own words, like I'm telling it like I'm Morgan Freeman, like I'm just going making it really deep. And I'll be like, hey, is that all about right? And they're gonna be like, yeah, man, that's right. Like you
You
know
know me
me.
so well.
You know
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And you know what? And know what happens then? I've just built rapport. I've showed professionalism. They now trust me, and they now feel obliged to reciprocate and listen to me.
Yep. So what's funny about that? So two things as you were saying that. So back in the old call center days, we had a set close process. So basically appointment setters, and then if they were qualified, they would go to the closer. And one of the best setters I ever met, he had, so he had these little cubicles, and the only thing he had on his wall was this paper that said what, how come, and what for. Or why, how come, and what for. And this dude would just ask those three things over and over and over. And he would just create lay down sales all day, every day from those three things. Why, how come, and what for.
Because
Like
he's
if you're going
developing the
through,
client. He's
yeah,
developing.
because when you're going through a sales call and somebody tells you something, you're like, oh, well, why? And they're like, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, how come though? Blah, 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 right? Okay, well, what for? And it's amazing. You can say those three things throughout sales call, and you can get to know somebody better than like half of their best friends,
Yeah.
just because you're asking those questions. The other thing that came up though is that so I had a huge problem. So this is going back like 15 years when I first got into it. I had a huge problem of interrupting people because it was awkward to me to ask people that many questions and just sit there and listen. It was awkward. I hated like the silence sometimes when they would stop. And so we had these mute switches. We had like corded headphones that we would use in our office. And so I would flip the mute switch on. I would ask them a question, flip the mute switch on, because I would have to make myself feel more comfortable. I would have to sit there and be like, uh-huh, yeah, uh-huh. And then I remember, so my brother's probably the best closer that like sales closer I've ever met. He's like, dude, you talk too much. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're interrupting people. You're asking them questions and you keep like putting in uh-huhs and yas and everything else, and it can disrupt people's thought patterns. Stop doing that. I couldn't stop doing it. Like it was so awkward to me. I couldn't stop. So I had to literally flip my mute switch on, and I would sit there, be talking, and they couldn't hear me. And that was like how I ended up getting pretty good at it. And then finally it was like, okay, it's not actually that awkward for me not using all these filler words. So, I mean, there's just a lot of little nuanced stuff that it's funny kind of going back into this stuff.
Absolutely, man. And I love talking like this kind of sales stuff. And at the end of the day, and I always compare it to like dating, because it's crazy when people come in and want to be like, oh yeah, I want to build rapport by saying something stupid or whatever. And then I'm going to talk all about this product. Oh, it does this, that, the other. Well, if you were to go try to meet somebody and date them, you see somebody, you're like, oh, or he is a potential target, a potential lover that I want to make a connection with. And you go up and you say some kind of corny line, and then you start talking all about the product, i.e., yourself, and
Yeah.
everything that's great about you and why they should consider you for a potential partner. Is that person going to go home with you? Is there any potential chance that they're going to be like, "Yeah, you've convinced me"? Or if you go up and just say, "Hi, my name's Greg. What's your name? Hey, what are you doing here? How long you been here? Where are you from? What kind of stuff do you believe in? And like, and asking questions about them, developing out their situation, letting them talk. What are they looking for? What kind of things they like? What are their interests? Right? You're going to have a lot more likely chance that you can find something that you'd be like, oh, you know what? We have commonality here.
Well,
Right.
you get to the end of the night, and all of a sudden she looks at you. She's like, "I feel like you know me better than anybody I've ever met before."
Yeah.
Because I actually cared and asked you questions, right?
Yeah.
Like that, it's that simple. It's because I didn't just sit here and give you like all this verbal diarrhea about how great of a dude I am and why you should love me, right? It's like, no, like I just took some time and asked you some questions and I got to know you. And now all of us, and especially in this day and age, right? With like social media, like if I had somebody that was like 18, 19 come up to me and be like, dude, how do I go out and like get a girlfriend?
Mm.
I'd be like, put your phone in your pocket and ask like these 10 questions. We like between me and you, Greg, we could probably go and like make millions of dollars like selling dating advice right now because it would
Oh,
be
yeah.
like just go ask like these 10 questions and every girl now will just love you because they're so used to not getting that type of attention that if you just ask them and care about them, you'll probably have more girlfriends than what you could ever need or boyfriends, reverse it.
It's also just the simple fact of like this walking up and talking to a stranger, which people don't do nowadays.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you done 75 hard or live hard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm on phase 3 of live hard right now.
So
Right.
I didn't do phase 3. The only reason why, and this might sound like an excuse, but I live so rural, dude, there's no one I can go up and talk to as random strangers. Like maybe I get like on a daily basis though, like I live 12 miles south of a town of 400 people. So there's just nobody here. Like if I lived in the city, so I ended up not doing, I know that's probably an excuse, but it was like legit. It was like, I can do all the cold water stuff. I've done all that stuff before.
Yeah.
Like, but the talking to a stranger, like, I don't know where the hell I'm going to find one around here.
Yeah, it was a little challenging. I was worried about that specific piece of the talking to a stranger. But what I've noticed is that like people are actually really like they appreciate it. Like when I walk up and I just say, "Hey, my name is Greg," out of nowhere. "Hey, what's your name? Tell me a little bit about yourself. How long you lived here?" Blah blah blah. They end up just start talking, right? And so I had a conversation with a woman in a hotel lobby when I was traveling, and I happened to, and she happened because I'm a big dude. I'm 6'7", man. I like everybody looks at me, but sometimes I'll just notice if someone's like looks at me and then does the old double take. And so I had to talk to strangers. So I was like, oh, they looked at me going. So I went over and talked to her. We ended up having a 2-hour conversation, bro.
Wow.
A 2-hour conversation just sitting in the lobby because I was waiting to actually go my flight out, and my flight was several hours away. So I was really just wasting time. And then she was like, "Hey, can I give you my number?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." Like, sure. I didn't even ask for it. She just gave it to me. Like, and she was like, "Oh, I want to keep it." She was like, "That was the best conversation I've ever had with anybody." And it was a complete stranger. And I was like, "Well, I appreciate that." And if you just like have some guts and like take a chance and go up and just ask questions, everybody wants to talk about themselves. I cannot
Yes.
stress that enough. Like, and you showing patience and understanding and just listening, man, you're gonna go. I don't care what you look like. You're gonna be able to get anybody.
Yeah.
like,
No, for sure. For
like,
sure.
it's crazy.
I mean, think about like, at least in my opinion, why has social media been so successful? Because people can talk about themselves
Yeah.
finally, right? It's like I can put whatever opinion out there that everyone used to look at me and be like, oh gosh, here comes so and so, right? Like I better walk away before they tell me everything, before they tell me all about themselves. And now it's like, no, I can just put it out there and the whole world has to read it, or at
Yeah.
least scroll by it. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, and that's it. Like, and I think that so many people in sales, they just focus on the wrong thing. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's just like, I get that you are so good at what you do. You just want to tell everybody how good you are at what you do. But I have seen absolute dog shit products go crazy, just crazy. And it's because they were sold right. And I've seen people who do things like far above and beyond that they just don't ever get any traction because they can't figure out how to sell it. Because they're just so excited about their product, their service, or whatever that it's just that's all they want to talk about. And everyone's like, cool, man. Like, but what can it do for me? Well, it doesn't matter though. It has this feature, this function, right? Doesn't matter. Like, what can it do for me? And so, yeah, once you understand that we're all selfish critters, then I think it makes sales a lot easier.
It does. It makes sales a lot easier. And it's just,
Yeah.
but it's really, I think the challenging piece is getting salespeople to accept that and actually practice what we're talking about here. Because I always get those salespeople that are like, Well, yeah, but I one time had a sale. This one time is really big that I knew all this stuff, and it's just like, and they just go back to things that they think is good. It's like, okay, well, yeah, dude, a broken clock is right twice a day,
Yeah.
right? So
You're going to fall into a couple sales, you know, most likely, no matter what.
it's gonna happen. But if I could take you from having a 25 to 30% closing ratio to a 75% closing ratio because you learn how to communicate appropriately, wouldn't you want that? Like,
Yeah.
it's getting them to just accept it and apply it. Cause then they're like, well, I feel awkward. I've never done it before. Go have some conversations with some strangers. It's not hard. Go to the grocery store, see somebody. Hey, my name is so and so. Hey, compliment them on their shoes, on their purse, on their clothing. Say something to them. Find something that you can identify in the moment that you'd be like, oh, I want to comment on that because it's remarkable. So I'm going to remark about it, say something, introduce myself, and ask a question about them. Hey, how long do you live here? Do you live in the area? What are you from the state? Blah blah blah. Like, have a conversation. And a lot of times people will just talk. And if you feel awkward, say, hey, I'm trying to learn how to talk to strangers more and communicate better. So, like, I've made a challenge to myself that I'm going to have one conversation meaningful with one stranger a day. And then they're probably going to be like, oh, okay, that's really cool. What made you do that? And then the conversation, boom, starts, done.
Yep. Well,
So,
like one thing to me that has always made it easy for me when I'm doing like sales training and stuff, and I've told this story like 1,000 times, but so it was probably '09, 2010, somewhere in there when we had our big call center. And like I said, my brother, he's one of the best closers I've ever met. And he literally, so we're selling internet marketing coaching, right? He literally did not know how to check his email. And he was the top producer, usually by about double of the next guy out of like 70 people on this call center. He couldn't check his email. So if selling the actual product was important, he would have been the worst performer on there. He was like the only dude on the floor that couldn't check his email. Like he literally, somebody would be like, "Hey, can I send you an email?" He'd be like, "Sure." And then he'd go into our secretary's office and be like, "Hey, will you guys figure out when this email comes in? You're like tell me what it says." And it was just like, dude, you've got to figure this out. Like we're in the internet marketing world. Like you gotta know how to check your email. And he
yeah.
like refused because he's like, it doesn't matter. Email stuff doesn't matter. Like that's not why people buy. And then enough people like in the call center area would start seeing that and be like, okay, maybe you don't have to know a whole lot about this internet marketing stuff to sell it. And so that to me was like when it really just changed the whole paradigm in my head
Yeah.
because I was like, I got to get really good. I've got to watch all this stuff. I've got to learn about, all of these things. And it was like, no, like you can never know too much, but you can absolutely say too much. And a lot of times when people know too much, they say too much. And
Mhm.
so I almost like was like, okay, I've got to take a step back away from the internet marketing stuff and focus more on the sales side of it. Like I know too much about this stuff. I'm not doing it right. I see my brother here crushing it. He's making all this money every single week and he can't even check his email. Like, how is that logically possible? And then you understand, well, sales aren't logical. They're emotional.
Yep.
People buy on emotion, they justify it with logic, right? Like they buy because you have them at a certain emotional point. Now, if you don't justify it with logic, they're going to call you back the next day and say, hey, I want a refund or I want to cancel or whatever. So you have to provide that logic. But I think so many people err on the logic with no emotion, whereas it's like, no, if you can do like 80% emotion and justify it with 20% logic, people will stick. You'll have a good retention rate, all that type of stuff. And it'll probably make you a ton more money. At least in my experience, it's always been that way.
That's 1,000% right. So if you look at the human brain, the way the human brain is split up, we have our neocortex and then we have our limbic system, our limbic brain. Our limbic brain controls, and every creature on the planet has a limbic brain. So every animal on the planet that has a brain has a limbic brain. And that limbic brain controls emotions, right? Emotional reactions, but it also controls decision making. Now, our neocortex, that's what gives us the ability to speak, to process data, to understand information, but it has no capacity for decision making. Too often, salespeople try to get decisions based off of data and facts. That's why you get the I got to think about it. That's exactly why, because there's zero emotion that is built into that sale right there. You have to tap into their limbic system. You have to tap into their emotions. The decision making process at a base level is an emotional process. You are the way you said it is absolutely correct. It is 80% emotional, and it is tied to the logic, which backs up the decision that they're making. It's the justification as to why they're making a decision. And by the way, for all the audience, listen, we are dropping some fucking nuggets right now. So this is like some of the best sales coaching that I've ever had for anyone that's come on. Like this will teach you how to be a better salesman. If you listen to the things that Derek and I are talking about, this is going to help you be better in sales across the board.
100%. So you have the psychology behind it. I'm a dumb guy that lives out on a ranch. I just always look at it this way. Your wallet's closer to your heart than it is to your head, right? Like we used to kind of make that joke back in the old days, but it's like, you know what? Like people's wallets are always going to be closer to their heart than they are to their head. So you got to sell them through the heart, right? Like that's it. You obviously have the scientific reason behind it, which makes a ton of sense. And I've heard something similar to that, but I'm probably not smart enough to to like remember the actual logic or the reason why that works that way. But that just always made sense to me. It's like, okay, yeah, the wallet is closer to the heart. That makes sense. So yeah, we got it. And now the funny thing is though, is so here's something that happened to me is that I got to the point to where I started just crushing it, right? But then I started getting some cancellations, some chargebacks.
Yeah.
And then I realized like, oh, you can actually go too far.
Yeah.
You can go 95% emotion, 5% logic. Person wakes up the next morning, is like, I don't even know what the hell I bought. Right. Like I remember having this person.
Drunk.
Yeah. Well, I had a person, I had this lady call me back the next day and she's like, Derek, like, I think I want to cancel. And I'm like, why? We just got you started. And she's like, I don't even know like what I bought. And I'm like, you bought life-changing, whatever it was. You paid to change your life, like I went so far away from it. So but I think that literally like 99% of the people I've ever seen will never go that far. They'll never get far enough. But I did run into that a little bit to where it was like, okay, you do have to give them some stake. It can't all be sizzle. Like you do have to provide them with some logic. So I did run into that just as maybe a cautionary tale. But again, 99% of salespeople out there, you'll never even get, at least again, in my experience, they'll never get even close to that much emotion in their sales call to ever have to worry about that. They're always going to deal with the opposite side of that. They're always going to, logically, it makes sense for me to try to explain everything. And logically to me, like if I'm going to buy, I want all the information. Number one, you're projecting yourself onto your clients, which you should never do. But number two is that, again, yes, you will. There's a reason why every car salesman wants you to get in the car and take it for a test drive, because there's an emotional attachment that you'll start feeling. This stuff is not like, it's like primal in us, right? Like it's our emotions will take over, and we all do it. Regardless of how much we think we do, we all get to that emotional state, and then we make decisions based on that emotion. And hopefully we can justify it with enough logic to make it make sense tomorrow.
So the way I kind of see it, it's like priming a lawnmower. Like your emotion is you priming it, right? And priming it to where you're getting the engine ready, and then the logic is just you like getting that lawnmower started. You get the lawnmower started, it's off to the races. People are buying, right? You have to have enough of a balance between the two, right? And you're absolutely right, Derek. What I found is that when I do like my sales process is all front loaded emotion. And then once I've gotten to where I know, like and there's a moment, like usually you can tell when you've asked enough questions, you've got enough information, you're showing some empathy, you're recounting their story to them, and they're like, yeah, that's 100% right. And their tonality changes and their tone drops, and you can feel like the walls coming down. They're like, and in their mind, what they're saying is like, shit, I got to get this taken care of. I need to get this taken care of. Sometimes they'll even say like, how do I deal with this? Like, how do I fix this? And then it's like, well, let me show you. And that's where the logic comes in. That's where you're like, hey, again, my name's Greg. I am an expert, or I am proficient at helping people just like you, people in your scenario. I've helped a lot of people. So I just want you to know you can trust me. I'm here to help. And I think I have some options that will make a lot of sense to you. So let's go ahead and review those really quickly. And then that's where I'm coming in with the logic. Boom. This is what I'm looking at. Everyone in your situation, I do this scenario, or this is the number one thing I do. And here's why. Let me show you why. And I'm linking all the product benefits to their issues, that I got the emotional issues, and I'm making a connection between the two.
Yep.
So that it's really sticky. Makes it a very sticky sale.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes it relevant, right? To
Yeah.
where, because it's the same thing, like if you're talking maybe like adding a monthly subscription to somebody's online business or something like that.
Mhm.
And they had told you earlier that maybe they have a concern about an online business going up and down and up and down. And it's like, yeah, you remember how you're kind of talking about how online businesses can kind of go up and down? I mean, how would it make a difference? Like if you had let's say a subscriber base online that was more predictable revenue, how would that make you feel? Oh yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. I was telling you, the sales go up and down, right? So no, if we could have something that was like more continuous every single month, and now all of a sudden, like, I don't even have to sell you. I'm just asking you the question, how it would make a difference, and you're going to sell me on why you need it. And
Yep.
so that was like the big thing that like I really feel like I've gotten good at over the years is almost like the reverse sale, right? To where it's like I'm not selling you, I'm just asking you questions, and you're going to sell me. So that way, when we get to the end, because one of the things that I love, and it just cracks me up more so than anything, and this hopefully won't offend too many people, but I always find it funny. Objection. And I'm like, man, I'm lazy. I don't want to overcome objections.
You broke up a little bit. You said you always find it funny, and that's where you broke up.
Oh, sorry. I always find it funny when you see like salespeople brag about how good they are at overcoming objections.
Yeah.
Because I'm always like, I'm lazy. I don't want to overcome objections. I would rather eliminate the objections before we ever have them. So that way, when we
Yes.
get to the end and I'm saying, what type of card do you use? Oh, that's a Visa. It starts with a 4. Go ahead and read it 4 at a time, and I'll read it back to you when you're done. That's my closing process, because I'll get that too. What's your closing question? It's like, yeah, we all have closing questions, right? And yes, like we can go through those. But what I would rather do is have a sales process that doesn't have to overcome objections, because I don't like getting to the end of the call and being like, all right, like I'm going to overcome every objection you throw at me because I'm some sales badass. It's like, no, I'm lazy at the core. Like I would rather just have such a good sales process to where when we get to the end, you might have some questions, but I'm not having to freaking battle you for 30
Mhm.
minutes. I'm not having to overcome a bunch of objections. So I don't know. That's always something that I find funny, especially if you're in like any sales groups or anything. It's like, this is the objection that overcomes it. And it's like, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to get really good at the process to where I don't ever have to overcome an objection.
I agree 1,000%. And like honestly, I don't even really teach on overcoming objections or rebuttals. A lot of times people mistake objections. So for instance, like in the insurance industry, it's like, well, I want to talk to my kids about this. That's not really an objection. That's more of a topic of conversation. That's them expressing a concern maybe that they've had from maybe something they've purchased before in the past. And that's a really good opportunity for you to jump in and kind of get in a better understanding of like maybe something happened to them in the past that they made a mistake, a bad purchase, that their kids were like, Mom, why'd you do that? Blah, 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 blah. You got this, that, the other. And you can find out and you can look into that. And then also encourage them or reinforce that, like, yeah, you should talk to your kids, because if you pass away, they're going to be the ones that are going to be handling that process. We need to talk to them. You're absolutely right. Right. And now they're like, instead of me being like, oh, well, we still got to do the process. We still got to, let's just get this signed and blah, blah, blah. One is me having a conversation, agreeing with them, opening up conversation, letting them kind of talk about their challenges about that specific topic. And another is me treating it like it's an objection and basically going to battle with them. And anytime you challenge them, even the slightest bit, what's going to happen? They're going to put their feet, they're going to dig their heels in, they're going to start pushing away. And now it's a constant battle at that point. The only real objection that I can say is like, okay, as an objection is like, you go for the banking information or the credit card information, and they say, I'm not giving you that.
Yeah.
That's an objection. Now you're battling. And honestly, if you got to that point, if you got all the way to the end and you're trying to get money, you're trying to get the credit card information, and you get, I'm not giving you that, you failed in your sales process. You failed.
Yep. Because they should just be thinking that's part of the process.
Yes.
Right. And I've talked, over the years doing training as well, is like, well, how do you overcome that? And it's like, well, yeah, exactly what you said, which is people don't walk up to the grocery counter and they say, that's going to be $29.12. You're like, well, I ain't giving you my credit card. It's like, no, you just know that's part of the deal. If you go to the grocery store and you go to check out, guess what? You're going to have to give them your credit card or your debit card. And in sales, for some reason, people will set up their conversation structure in a way to where that's not just the next natural step.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be understood that like, this is the process we go through, and this is just the next step, just like you would do if you cash out, you know. And I know for me, like if you are getting objections at the end, I always kind of retreat back to, okay, look, let me ask you this. With everything that we covered, does it make sense? Right? And 99 times out of 100, they'll say yes. If they say no, then obviously you've done a poor job at explaining it.
Mm.
Be like, okay, so would you agree? You know, because maybe they're like, I want to put it off. Let me call you back next week. Let me think about it. And be like, okay, because I wouldn't expect you, Greg, or anybody that I work with to do something that doesn't make good sense to them. But let me ask you this: like, if it makes sense today, would you agree that it'll make sense tomorrow, next week, next month? Like, it'll still make sense? I mean, is that fair? And they'll usually say yes and say, okay. So the only thing that we're doing by putting this off is just wasting time, right? Now, again, Greg, tell me if this doesn't make sense, if it's something you don't want to do, that's fine. You can tell me, no, I promise I'm not here to give you some big, long, drawn out, high pressured sales pitch. But if it does make sense, then I want to make sure that I can hold you accountable to actually get this taken care of. So again, does it make sense?
Yeah.
Say yes. Say, okay, great. So what I'm going to need is I'm going to need, you know, XYZ information, and we're going to go ahead and finish this up. And normally, like, once you make sure, at least in my experience, once they understand that, yeah, it does make sense today. And if it makes sense today, it'll make sense tomorrow, next week, next month. So really the only thing that we're losing is time. We're, you know, in insurance, it's like, God forbid you go out and get hit by a bus tomorrow. You'll wish you'd have taken care of this today, right? Like, but I just always try to walk them through that. And if they tell me no at that point, there's probably some closers out there that are like, you should go again and overcome the objection 5 different ways. No, because
what six no's before you get that yes.
Yeah, exactly. You hear all that stuff. But what I've had, because of all of the years I've been doing this and literally thousands upon thousands of conversations, is there also reaches a point in that process to where you just piss people off. Mm-hmm. And now they, you know, and so I don't ever want to get there. Like I'm all good, like pushing it as far as I can, as long as I feel like it's a good thing for them. But there also becomes a certain point to where, like, some people are just cowards. Like, they just won't make decisions, right? Like, that's why you have very successful people and some people that never can get out of their own way because they won't make decisions, regardless of how good the information is, how good the plan, how good whatever it is. They just will not make, you know, we used to call those rotten apples, right? Like in sales, I always look at it. You have green apples, you have red apples, you have green apples, you have sour apples. It's like your red apples, anybody's closing those people, right? It doesn't matter. You could show up to their doorstep and hand them a piece of paper and they'd sign it. Anybody's getting them. Mm-hmm. Then you have the green apples. Those are the people that are like, they could go either way. And then you have the rotten apples. Those are people just won't buy. And I think a lot of times salespeople run into those, and then they get discouraged because it's like, I just couldn't get it. I couldn't get it. It's like, there was just a bad apple. Like, that happens. Not everybody you get is going to be a deal. That's okay. Move on. But where the money is made and where the separation occurs in sales is on the green apples. Because if you're getting a lot of those green apples, you're probably a top closer. You know, you're a top salesperson.
Yeah.
But if those 50-50 balls are going the other way all the time, you probably need to go find something else to do. And so that's the way I always look at it. Like, you know, if you get to the end and you just figured out this is a rotten apple, okay, move on, next, right? But if it's a green apple and you miss it, you better get better.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I've made a very, very similar analogy when it comes to sales. There's like there are people that just literally like have a check written on their forehead ready to go. And you're just like, zero effort. It's just done. So
those are the reward for working your ass off on the green apples. Yes. That's the way I always look at it. When you get what we always call a lay down, when you get one of those, like, that's your reward for working hard on the green apples.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Derek, we've been talking about sales and sales coaching for 45 minutes now. This has been awesome, man. And we didn't really get into your current business that much. We got to do a part 2. Yeah. We got to bring you back on and learn more about your time and how you did that transition to your business that you have on your ranch there in Idaho.
Yeah. Yeah. So, man, I'd love to. This was fun though.
It was fun, man. It was fun. If anyone wants to reach out to you, they want to learn more about your sales coaching, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me. Just Derek@primalking.com was probably the best way. Shoot me an email there. Hit me up on social media. Primal King LLC is kind of everything that I do on that side of it. So yeah, you can hit me up there. Follow me on Instagram. Yeah, either way.
Sounds good, man. That sounds good, brother. So one question I always have with all my guests at the end, before we end the session, if you could break bread, have lunch with, have dinner with, spend time with, and pick their brain with 3 people in the history of the world, alive or dead, who would those 3 people be?
Oh man, that is.
And why?
So I'm probably going to make the worst answers ever. And if I know this is something I'll look back on and be like, you dummy, why did you not say so and so? So 3 people dead or alive that you could break bread with. So number 1,
Or dead, or dead. It could be something dead as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, dead. So honestly, number 1 would be my dad. He's been passed away for 6 years. So just love to, because everything that we're doing here on the ranch is kind of like part of that whole legacy. And
Mhm.
so if I could sit down with him, I would love to just pick his brain on what we think we're doing here. So that one to me would be an easy one. The other 2, as cheesy as it is, I would love to be able to sit down with George Washington.
That's not cheesy.
Yeah. And it's not even like a business thing. It's that guy, from everything that I know, and I'm not super into history, but like they wanted to make him a king and he didn't want it. And so I would just love to know like the humility that would be required when everyone's like, hey, we want to make you the king, and a king can do whatever they want. And the guy was like, no. So I think it would just be fascinating to talk to somebody who would have to have such a level of humility to essentially kick the ass of the strongest army that the earth had ever seen, quote, supposedly at that point, and then turn around and be like, yeah, but I don't want to be a king.
Mm.
The third one, I would have to say, oh man, there's a couple of people on, because I would like to talk to somebody in the business side of it. I mean, right now, just like current event wise, I would say Elon. Be like,
Elon's a good one.
yeah, just because I think that like I'm seeing all this Twitter chaos and debacle happen supposedly, but I think that dude has like a plan that no one else is seeing. And so I'd love to sit down and talk to him about what that plan is. And also, like with SpaceX and some of the other Tesla and stuff like that. Plus, he just seems like an interesting dude to sit down and like talk to. So I'd have to
Probably
say
one of the
this.
smartest people on the planet right now.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why, like, I see all these people attacking him online, like, what an idiot. He bought Twitter and he's running into the ground. And it's like, you may not like the guy, but like, you don't do what he's done with PayPal and Tesla and like, maybe one time you could call it somewhat luck or good fortune, but not when you've done it like over and over and over again. Like, he didn't just buy Twitter and he's going to run it to the ground. Like, he has to have some plan. So I would be fascinated to see what that is. Right. And I'm sure we'll know kind of what his plan is soon, but maybe I'm a little impatient just because I'm finding some of this stuff kind of interesting, watching it kind of fascinating. So maybe it would be like this FBF dude too, that just crashed all that crypto exchange. I don't know though. He seems like a different cat, but he might be kind of fascinating to like, dude, you're 30 years old. And like, how did you build like, I don't know, man. That's where I put on my tinfoil hat. Like, it all just seems weird to me. So maybe that would be 3.5. How about
3.5? Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Derek, thank you so much for coming on and having a conversation, sharing your experience with everybody, and just having a really, dude, this was a dope ass sales conversation. I really enjoyed it. For all of you watching, if you got any value from this, and I know you got value if you watched it until now, because Derek was dropping some heat. All right. The best thing that you can do is share this content, tag Derek, put it in your socials, put it on your stories, tell your friends about it. This is how we grow, is by word of mouth, is organic reach. And that's how we can get to more listeners and help more people and really help be the difference. So if you got any value from this, do a value-based exchange. I ask of you, I need your help. Go ahead and do that. You can also put a review online on Apple Podcasts if you listen to it there. This has been the Be the Difference podcast. As always, I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time, deuces. We'll see you.